What's going on? This is your man John Fortune, your host of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show. And I know I've been off for a little couple of days because I've been focusing on so many things, and I'm just excited to get back into being on this, doing my shows, and doing what I'm supposed to do. So today's show, I'm going to focus on the top 10 best free agents that the Redskins have ever signed. Well, not that they've ever signed, just from the time when free agency really started, which was 1992 and on. But I think that I've compiled a list that everybody can kind of agree on. Y'all might have a different order in that system than I have, but I felt that these guys were on the top 10 when it came to free agents that we signed and that were good for us. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with some notables that we signed that were pretty decent for us. My first one is Andre Carter. He was a really good defensive end. He didn't really come on for us until his second year, in which he actually made like a huge splash for us in his second year. And I think he was with us for about 4 or 5 years. And he was a solid defensive end for a very long time. His last year with us, he kind of really diminished in talent, and he ended up going to New England and was only there for a year. So that's one notable guy. Another notable guy is Casey Rabach. He was our center for a long time. I can't remember where we got him from, but I remember we picked him up in training camp. And all of a sudden, he became a long-term starter for us for a very long time. Another guy is Corey Lichtensteiger. He was a guy that we actually had to kind of like groom into the position. But once we groomed him into that position, he ended up becoming one of the best combo guards for us because he played the left side and the right side for us. He also played a little bit of center for us as well. And I think one game we actually moved him out to tackle. So he was another one that was a really good signer for us. And this one is going to go back a little bit for some people. But Stanley the Sheriff Richard, we had gotten him from San Diego some years ago. But he came in, he played very well for us. He was all over the field. He got a lot of tackles for us and everything. So those are my notable free agent signings that we got. Now, we're going to get into my top 10 list of best free agents the Redskins signed over the years. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into the list. At number 10, I have Deshaun Jackson. Now, when it comes to Deshaun Jackson, first off, we didn't even realize that the Eagles were going to let him go. But when we did, this was the first time that I was glad that Fan Snyder was our owner, because he immediately jumped on this guy and we signed him. And during his 3 years that he was with us, he basically had 2,702 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns, and of those 3 years, 2 of those years he was a 1,000-yard receiver. So that's one thing that I've always been impressed with, the fact that we was able to get Deshaun Jackson when we got him, and the fact that our owner actually stood up. I was glad for once that he was our owner, and he actually went out there and did something that was good for the team. But as time went on, for some reason, he didn't want to keep either him or Pierre Garçon around, which was a very terrible thing. At number 9, I have Brad Johnson. Brad Johnson was with us for about 2 years. Both years were playoff years. I think 1 year we were bumped out of the playoffs, and then the second year we got bumped out by Tampa Bay after making it really far against in that particular playoffs. And Brad Johnson, for the 2 years that he was with us, he threw for 6,510 yards. And his first year with us, he threw for 4,005 yards. He also had 35 touchdowns for us during those 2 years. So this guy was very productive for us. Of course, they replaced him with Jeff George, which was a very damaging thing. And sure enough, the following year, once he went to Tampa Bay, he ends up going and helping them win the Super Bowl a year removed from being in Washington. Saddest thing ever. At number 8, I got Cornelius Griffin. He was the big defensive tackle that we had gotten from the Giants. And I remember the things that I remember the most about this guy was that he was disruptive by himself. And he would take on double teams and he would sit up there and blow up double teams. He did so much for us. And you talking about a run stuffer. This guy was a beast at stopping the run. During his time with us, he was with us for 6 years. He had 258 tackles and 16 and a half sacks. For a defensive tackle, especially in the era where, cut blocking was a big thing and everything like that, Cornelius Griffin was a very, very good player for us. At number 7, I have Marcus Washington, the linebacker we got from Indianapolis. And I have to admit, one of the best linebackers that we've had in this Washington Redskins franchise. He only played a short time with us. He was with us for 5 years. And only thing I can't remember is that he was able to cover anything coming out the backfield. He was able to cover all tight ends. And at the same time, he never missed a tackle. All I remember is every time he would sit up there and be around the ball, he was tackling somebody. And even with that being said, I remember him moving from the weak side to the middle, to the strong side, back to the middle, back to the weak side. He was one of the only linebackers that I've ever really known that was that flexible when it came to really playing along, being able to play all levels of linebacker. He also moved down to defensive line because there were times where they had him rushing the passer. During that time with us, he had 10 forced fumbles. He had 19 and a half sacks. And he had 378 tackles. So, again, this is one of the best signings that the Redskins ever had. At number 6, I have Sean Springs. Now, the reason why I tell y'all about how good Sean Springs was is because a lot of people tend to forget. Because, with Champ Bailey just making it to the Hall of Fame and things like that, a lot of people tend to forget that the reason the Redskins didn't really fall off that much with the Champ Bailey deal was because we got Sean Springs right behind that. Like the same year that we traded away Champ Bailey, we ended up getting Sean Springs, which was an amazing pickup for us because, one, he was bigger than Champ Bailey. He wasn't as good of a cover guy as Champ Bailey, but he could cover. And also, we had converted him to a safety at some point in his career because he was able to also move around because I think we had him for 1 year where right when we brought in D'Angelo Hall, we sat up there and moved him to strong safety. But, during that time, he was a beast for us. Sean Springs was with us for 5 years. He had 250 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, 12 interceptions, and 7 sacks. And like I said, again, the reason we tend to forget those times that Champ Bailey wasn't with us was because Sean Springs did such an amazing job when he came in for us. So, even though, yes, I understand, being as though what we got in return for him when it came to Clinton Portis, the fact that we had Sean Springs to replace him was a thing. At number 5, I have Terry Allen. Now, a lot of people who might listen to this broadcast may not remember Terry Allen and what we didn't know we were getting when he came to us. He was with Minnesota for some years, and we at that point had just assumed that because at that point they had drafted Leroy Hoard, and they had a couple other guys that was they had drafted Robert Smith, so they had no need for Terry Allen anymore. But when Terry Allen came to the Redskins, it was something that we were not expecting at all. Like I said, a lot of people aren't going to remember Terry Allen, but the one thing I do remember is when he came in here, he immediately made an impact. He was with us for 4 years. He had 37 touchdowns, 4,086 rushing yards. And if y'all remember that 1996 year, he actually had 21 touchdowns that year and actually held on to that record until I think it was Emmitt Smith had broke it. So for a long time, Terry Allen was our guy, and he was just a phenomenal player for us. We did not know we was getting with Terry Allen. We thought he was kind of washed up, because I remember when he came here, a lot of people in DC was like, "Oh my God, if the Vikings don't want him, what we gonna do with him?" And to be honest, I'm glad we did sign him. At number 4, I have D'Angelo Hall. Now, I have D'Angelo Hall high on here because, one, he was an area guy who wanted to play for the Redskins. He wasn't somebody who was here just to make money. He was here because he had a passion for the team. He was from the area, and he really wanted to be here. And at the same time, he did play like he wanted to be here. D'Angelo Hall was with us for 10 years. And that's pretty remarkable for a guy who, when he came to us, he was pretty good. He did what he was supposed to do. He would actually lock down a lot of the top wide receivers when we had defensive coordinators who were really, focused on, okay, you're our best corner. We're going to let you basically follow the best receiver. And D'Angelo Hall, for the most part, did his job. He also was a ball hawk. He found a way to be around the ball. Should it be to intercept the ball, have some type of pass defense on the ball, or be down there for a tackle? And during his time with us, D'Angelo Hall had 23 interceptions, 8 forced fumbles, 9 fumble recoveries, and 535 tackles. Understand this, for a cornerback to have that many tackles, that's got to be the most impressive thing you'll ever hear or see when it comes to this type of thing. At number 3, I have the great Ken Harvey. This is another guy that most people may not remember, and a lot of y'all may not remember because his backup is far more famous than him, which is Terry Crews. But Ken Harvey was a beast when he came to us. I remember we got him from the Cardinals, and when he came in, he showed up and he immediately showed out, because I think his first year with us, he had like 9 sacks. So, Ken Harvey was with us for 5 years. He had 13 forced fumbles, and he had 391 tackles. Of that, 326 were solo tackles, which means that Ken Harvey was probably the best. And if anybody came in his area, he was tackling them. Like, there was nobody getting away from Ken Harvey. And I also remember, for a guy who was like a DN linebacker type thing, because he was the first time that I ever really saw that D-line linebacker thing, other than I can't remember the other guy's name, the one who died in the car crash that played for Kansas City. But anyway, this was the first time that I had seen a guy who could play that linebacker defensive end position and just be amazing at it. He also had 41 and a half sacks for us during his 5-year tenure with us. That's pretty incredible. And he had 6 fumble recoveries during that time as well. At number 2, I have the toughest wide receiver, one of the toughest wide receivers that has ever graced the NFL, and probably the toughest wide receiver that's ever played for the Redskins, Pierre Garçon. Again, he was with us for 5 years. He had 376 receptions for us, 4,549 yards, and 21 touchdowns. He also had 2 years of 1,000 yards for us as well. And like I said, again, you're talking about one of the toughest wide receivers ever. And this is again where, Dan Snyder got out the way of the football minds and let this guy be signed to us, because, again, we heard about Pierre Garçon, but it wasn't until he got into a Redskins uniform that we knew about Pierre Garçon. And man, was this a big, big thing for us. And my number one free agent that I have to admit was probably the greatest signing we've ever had when it comes to Washington is London Fletcher. You talking about the linebacker of linebackers. Even though he was undersized, this guy had to be one of the greatest linebackers to ever play this game. He spent 7 years with us, y'all. I mean, 7 whole years with the Redskins. And that's got to be like the most remarkable thing ever when it comes to a linebacker. Not only that, during his time with us, I mean, his total career tackles is 2,031. That's for his total career. That includes him being in St. Louis and in Buffalo. Do you know of that 2,000 something tackles? 955 was in a Redskins uniform. 955 tackles was in a Redskins uniform. And not only that, he was also the league leader multiple years for the Redskins and for the NFL in tackles. So, I mean, that was incredible. He had 9 forced fumbles during his time with us and 11 and a half sacks. When I think of the guy who basically, when you think about superstar linebackers that have been with certain teams and who people, when you talk about a linebacker and a team, you think about Dick Buckets and the Bears. You think about so many different linebackers who've been remarkable. Ray Lewis and the Baltimore Ravens. Lawrence Taylor and the Giants. You think about all Mike Singletary and the Bears. You think about all these amazing linebackers. And to me, when it comes to London Fletcher, he's going to be right up there with me. So this is my top 10 best Redskins free agents to ever be signed, to ever come to the Redskins as free agents. And I want to hear what y'all have to say. Give me a like, give me a comment. Subscribe to my YouTube and everything, because I really want to know what y'all feel. Do y'all feel that my top 10 list of the best free agents is right? Or do you feel that there were other free agents who came here that were actually better? Now, again, understand my criteria. It is the 1992 year when free agency came into play. So players like John Riggins don't count. I'm not talking about people who were traded here either. So just want to make sure that I put that out there. So again, this is your man John Fortune, and this is the Frustrated Fan Sports Show.